Webinars as an intimate webinar, a private webinar for my entrepreneur upgrade and my mastermind course members. I only sent out about 12 invites, so I didn't expect everybody to turn up. I just wanted to do something small so I could test this format, so I could interact with you. And fantastic, you are all putting your comments in the chat box, and I love it because it shows me that you're there, you're actually hearing me now, and I really feel that we're making progress. So what I want to do is share with you some of the key highlights from this book, some of my experience from outsourcing, and then we can interact a little bit and Q&A, because this is kind of happening now through email on the Entrepreneur Upgrade course or through the masterminds anyway. So I thought it'd be great if we do this in one place and we could all share our experiences and so on. What I want to do is share the keynotes from this book today and some of my experiences from outsourcing. And my experience with outsourcing was I was outsourcing back in 2002, 2003, long before outsourcing was even popular, long before Tim Ferriss came along with a 4-hour work week. I built an office in India, 2 offices in India, spent about $100,000 building an office in India, 3 or 4 months of my time. I learned the hard way about outsourcing. You know, before we had, proper working Skype, proper working internet connections, proper working social media, Facebook wasn't even out. And then Tim Ferriss came along with the 4-hour work week in 2006, 2007, just blew all that up. And then everybody started outsourcing and the whole outsourcing thing blew up, and 80 to 90% of people started doing outsourcing, got it wrong. I want to share with you tonight what I think is the right way to do it. And we'll draw on the book, Chris Ducker's Virtual Freedom, and some of my own experience as well. So how about that? And you can hear me as well, so that's even better. So what I want to do today is talk about outsourcing to give you more time and choice, because that's what it's about. This is the problem that we have as entrepreneurs, is what's talked about a little bit in this book is the superhero CEO, the superhero startup entrepreneur syndrome, which is basically this: we think we can do everything ourselves. We want to be completely busy to be successful. And it's the wrong way to grow a business, because look at your business now. Look at where you are now. And my advice to you is this, is that your best strategy got you to where you are right now. Let me say that again. Your best strategy got you to where you are right now. So working harder at that strategy is not going to change anything. What you have to have is a different strategy. You have to change your strategy. So rather than be the superhero CEO who's going to do everything himself or herself, be completely busy, you need to get leverage, because leverage is the key to success, whether it be in business or wealth generation. So let's talk about that. And the key to leverage tonight I'm going to talk about is thanks to this guy, Chris Ducker, who wrote the book Virtual Freedom. What this book is really about is getting leverage through using virtual assistants. Now, I've been using virtual assistants for, nearly 10 years. I've had a lot of successes and a lot of failures. So I want to share with you some of my experiences working with VAs, as they're known. So most VAs live in the Philippines. Now, there's a reason for that. First reason is it's cheap. And secondly, they speak English. Okay? So there's a lot of advantages with that, but there are also some limitations, which I'll talk about as well. That best place to get VAs for certain tasks is the Philippines. And I'll show you how you can do that tonight. But it doesn't mean you only have to look at the Philippines as your option for virtual assistants. You can get virtual assistants in your own country, maybe more expensive. You can get virtual assistants in places like India. They're all over the world. So there's many places you can get virtual assistants. It just so happens that the Philippines is well suited to virtual assistants. So let's talk about how to actually use a virtual assistant, because let's go way back. I'll go back to Tim Ferriss's 4-hour work week, which is published 2006, 2007. I can't remember exactly. But when that was published, one of the things that Tim Ferriss talked about in the 4-Hour Workweek was virtual assistants. And he used a virtual assistant or a number of virtual assistants to grow his business. And a lot of people took that as license to go and get a virtual assistant to grow their business. And there was this phrase at the time called outsource your life. And what people thought was that by outsourcing everything, they would become part of the new rich, because all they'd do is they'd sit back on the beach, enjoy life, and let the virtual assistants do everything. Now, there was a problem with that, and I'll talk about why that doesn't work in this presentation today. But the problem with that was that a lot of people, or most of the people that took this approach, outsourced everything, and that just doesn't work. You can't outsource some things. There's some things that you must do personally, and I'll talk about which tasks you have to do as an entrepreneur, because they are your high value tasks, and there's stuff which you should outsource. And there's also a lot of stuff which you shouldn't even bother doing, which shouldn't even be outsourced or be done by you, and I'll talk about those tasks as well today. So there's this whole movement, and this was started by the 4-Hour Workweek, about outsourcing. And a lot of people were using premium credit cards. So they could use platinum cards, they could use gold Visa cards, and so on. And if you phone up a platinum Visa, for example, it has a concierge service. So you can phone up the person on the concierge service and you can say, hey, look, I'm going for dinner tonight with my wife. Can you make a booking at this restaurant? And the platinum Visa concierge service, could be American Express, could be MasterCard, will book that restaurant for you. So there's a lot of discussion at the time in forums, 2006, 2008, about how to use these services. Everybody talking about the kind of things that you could do with a credit card concierge service. And people were doing really crazy stuff. They were really pushing it to see how far they could go. It was interesting, but the problem was it was not useful. It was interesting as an experiment to grow your knowledge of outsourcing and to have a bit of fun outsourcing to a concierge service on a credit card, but it didn't help anything with growing a business. So what I want to talk today is about the science of outsourcing, because there really is a science about how to do it properly. And a lot of people get this wrong. When they outsource, they end up getting noise as a result, or they end up getting stuff back which is useless or wasting their time or money. So what I want to show you is how you can do it properly so you can really enjoy your time as an entrepreneur. To chill, focus on the things that matter. Because you're not going to be like this guy here. This is a dream. This doesn't exist, this kind of business model. But what you can be is somebody who focuses their time on the most creative stuff out there, the most creative tasks that add the most value to what you do, the stuff that really inspires you, the stuff that you wake up in the morning wanting to do. Because I assure you, I've done this. I've lived on tropical islands. I've lived in places like Lanzarote in the Canary Islands. I lived in Okinawa. I've lived on tropical islands. I tell you, sitting on the beach, counting the money is very boring after a while. So what you want to be is, rather than sitting on the beach counting the money, I know it sounds great, but after a while, I'll tell you, if you're an entrepreneur, you get bored of that really fast. You want to be doing the stuff that adds the most value. Like, for example, what I'm doing right here, right now with you. Presenting, sharing my knowledge, and interacting with entrepreneurs. That is the stuff that I enjoy, even though I don't need to get paid for this. That's the kind of work that I get excited about, that I look forward to on a daily basis. And by outsourcing some of my business, I'm able to do this. So what I wanted to start off, the science of outsourcing, is focus on 80-20. This is where it all starts. Now, what do I mean by 80-20? So some of you have probably heard of 80-20, right? It's the Pareto principle, as it's called. And what it means in business is that 20% of your activity creates 80% of your results. Let me say that again. 20% of your activity creates 80% of your results. So effectively 1/5, so one day of your week creates pretty much all the results that you create during a week, right? One day. So that could be one meeting, one phone call, one presentation, one piece of content, whatever it is, that creates almost all your results. Everything else is noise. Sure, it's a little bit of progress. But, for example, it could be a retweet here or a posting there. It doesn't really add much value. The problem is we as entrepreneurs look at that and say, okay, how can I do more? And how can I do more tweets or build a bigger Twitter following or more likes on Facebook or whatever? And we don't want to let go of this stuff. But what happens is if you want to grow as an entrepreneur, you have to say no. And outsourcing is key to that. So what do I mean? Say no to grow as an entrepreneur. This is such an important mantra to take on board. You're not going to grow by working harder. You're going to grow by saying no. So one of my challenges to you today, after this presentation or tomorrow, when you sit down with your planner, and this is one of the things that I impress upon people in the Entrepreneur Upgrade course, is the importance of a planner. That being just a notepad that you work with on a daily basis, or Evernote or whatever. What I want you to do is write down everything you do during a day. So what could those things be? So for example, you could be updating social media, posting, researching a blog post, going to a meeting, going to a conference, making a phone call, updating a database, updating your app, reading a book, whatever it is. There are many, many tasks that you do on a daily basis. And what I want you to do is write down all those tasks on one sheet of paper. Okay? And then take those tasks and circle which one of those create the most value. Which one of those are the high value tasks? So if you only did one thing today, what would it be? So for me, for example, if I only did one thing today, it would be this webinar. The other 7 or 8 hours are just noise. Tomorrow, if I was only to do one thing tomorrow, it will be recording my podcast. Then the other 6 or 7 hours are noise. So the question now is, how can I create an outsourcing system such that I can focus more on that one thing, that high value 20% task, and forget about the 80%. Push that out. Ignore it. Let somebody else do it. So how do we build that outsourcing system? That's what I want to talk about. That's the science of outsourcing. So first place to start is go to Upwork. Now Upwork used to be Odesk and Elance, and then it joined together. And if you go to Upwork, you'll find there are thousands of people on there who are already calling themselves virtual assistants. Like this example here. So there's a couple of things that I want to highlight to you that are important in this job profile. Firstly, how much they charge. So it goes without saying, the more you pay, the higher the quality. If you're paying $1 an hour, $2 an hour, you're not going to get high quality outsourcing. And then also look at their history. You want to find somebody who has an established history of success. You want to find somebody who has many, many hours of outsourcing work on their portfolio. You want hundreds or thousands of hours on their resume, because then they're trusted, they've done this, they know what's involved, and you don't have to teach them about outsourcing. So that's the starting point. Go and find a VA on Upwork, okay? And what I want to impress upon you is the importance of understanding how VAs work. Now, what VAs aren't are full-time employees for you. So a VA isn't somebody who you hire for 40 hours a week. That can be a situation, but it's not a good use of your time. VAs tend to be people who have 6, 7, 8 clients on the go at the same time. So you are just one of half a dozen clients that they are working for at the same time. And that's why it's important to have the right model for working with a VA, and I'll talk about a just-in-time model in a minute, somebody who can work as and when you get work coming through the door, not somebody who's there waiting for tasks, who comes back to you and saying, what do I do now? You don't want that situation. You want somebody who's got like an inbox. You put something in the inbox, they deal with it. What you don't want is somebody who works with you for a specified time, and then when they've done all the tasks, they come back to you and say, give me another task. That's a really bad situation to be in, because that ends up making you busy, giving them tasks, which is the worst of both worlds. You're giving them tasks that they don't need to be doing, and you're also a servant to their schedule as well. So we want to kind of avoid that. So what can you outsource to somebody like Carla? Well, there are so many different tasks that you can outsource to a VA. What I do with my VA is this. One of my main value adds during the week is podcasting. A VA can't do the podcasting. You know, I can't outsource the high value task, which is me interviewing somebody on a podcast. I can't do that because my listeners want to hear me, not the VA, right? But what a VA can do is support that task. So my VA, for example, will contact guests, coordinate times with them. Before the interview, we'll send them a link going to a web page where she's prepared like a list of things that we want the guest to do before the interview. Like, for example, set up their audio, the kind of questions that we're going to ask and so on. And then after the interview, my VA will also send a follow-up, which will say, hey, thanks. Remember we talked about a referral for the podcast. Have you got any names? So that's how you can use a VA to support your 20% rather than do your 20%. So for example, let's say you're doing blog posts. Now, you can't outsource the blog writing to your VA because your VA, no matter how good they are, will never be a writer. These are people whose English is good, but they will never be a writer per se, so you'll never get quality. But what they can do is they can support your writing. So let's say you've written a blog post. What a VA can now do is take your content, put it into the blog post, set everything up, put pictures in it, make sure all the categories are set up, schedule it, and so on. Now, they can take a lot of that heavy lifting away from you, so you can focus just on the really creative work. So that's why I like to use VAs in what I call the heavy lifting fashion, which is basically where they take away the heavy lifting for you so you can focus on the high value tasks. Because some people think they have to outsource that task, that high value task to the VA, but that never works. You can't outsource writing to a VA. You can't outsource podcasting to a VA. You can't outsource development or coding to a VA. But what a VA can do is support you by taking away all the less enjoyable parts of that particular task so your runway is clear, so you can just focus on the high value stuff. That's how I like to use VAs. Okay, so using VAs, good practices and avoiding bad practices. So let's talk about some of those bad practices, some of the big mistakes people make when outsourcing. And these are really common mistakes. And you really only learn by doing this and learning the hard way. You can waste a lot of time and money with a virtual assistant. So as I said, I've been doing this since 2003, spent a lot of money on it, made a lot of mistakes. I want to share some of those with you today. The first one is avoid being the virtual vulture. So what is a virtual vulture? Now, a virtual vulture is where let's say I outsource a task to a VA and then I'm hanging over the VA going, when's it ready? Come on, what's going on? Now some people do this via Skype live. They're watching the VA work. And in the old Odesk platform, when you outsource to somebody, you actually got screen captures of the VA's screen. Like it would be updated every minute, every 5 minutes. You get a capture of what the VA was actually doing. Now, for some people, that's great because they can say, okay, I can see exactly what my virtual assistant is doing. So they're not wasting time. They're not on Facebook, which they will be. They're not chatting to other people and so on. However, if you're in that situation where you're a virtual vulture on your VA, you're not using the situation properly. The best way to work with a virtual assistant is not to watch them work because then it ends up wasting your time. And it's not a good environment to be in anyway, because they're going to do something wrong anyway, and you're going to catch them doing it. So that's not a good relationship. The best way to do this is to say to the VA, hey, look, I'm not going to monitor what you're doing, but what I want to do is this: set you some tasks, and I want you to complete those tasks, and then I want you to send me a report at the end of the day telling me what you did. And also, if you do anything extra, put it in there as well. Now, I don't care how you do the task, just get the task done. If you have any problems, come to me and let's sort it out. Ask for help. That's the best way to work with VA. Set them a task and let them work on the task. Don't watch them doing it, because honestly, that situation will fail and create a bad relationship between you and the VA, which won't work in the long term. The second mistake that people make is that just because you can, don't outsource something just because you can. This goes back to my earlier story about Tim Ferriss and outsourcing the credit, all these tasks to credit card concierge services. And it's the same with entrepreneurs as well, is that we kind of outsource stuff just because we can, because it's fun, we feel like we're making progress, and we like this outsourcing thing. But it's actually better to delete a task than outsource it. If you can delete a task, that's the best thing. So your sort of priority list should be delete, outsource, do it myself. So your first option should always be delete a task. Can I delete this? Because even outsourcing a task costs time and money and focus for you. So the best thing is delete it. So for example, social media, do you need to be doing that? If you can't delete it, maybe you can automate it. There's some stuff that you don't need to be doing. And honestly, if you weren't doing it, what's going to change anyway? Probably not very much. So you've got to be ruthless with your tasks and go through them and say, do I actually need to be doing this? If I don't need to be doing this, can I automate it? If I can't automate it, I delete it. If I do need to be doing this, can I outsource it to a VA? If I need to be doing this myself, I can't outsource it. The third mistake, very big mistake that entrepreneurs make, is keeping your VA busy. Now, this is a common situation where a entrepreneur will hire a virtual assistant, let's say for 15, 20 hours a week. And then what will happen is the VA will complete all the tasks, or the tasks will change week to week this week. And so you've hired this VA for 15 hours this week, and you're paying this VA $10. So that's $150. You want to get your $150 worth of work out of the VA, and maybe you've only got 5 hours this week. So what do? You look at your task and you say, okay, I'll make some stuff and I'll give it to the VA. The VA can do this, the VA can do that. And you eventually get this up to 15 hours of work. This was a really bad thing to do, because what you are doing is you're creating noise for your VA. So your VA ends up doing stuff they don't really need to be doing. This sort of goes back to one of those tasks which you can delete, or you don't need to be doing in the first place. You're paying for it. It's costing you time and focus, and you have to deal with it when the VA gives it back to you, when you say, hey, look, I've done that task. So how do you deal with that? How do you prevent this keeping your VA busy situation? You've hired them for 15 hours and you've only got 3 or 4 or 5 hours of work. What do you do? And this is, I think, one of the problems that we entrepreneurs face, because this kind of stops us outsourcing in the first place. We kind of get worried that, I don't have enough work for the VA. Maybe I have 10 hours now, but next week maybe I only have 2 hours. So I don't want to hire a VA because I don't know what I should be doing with them. Should I have 15 hours, 10 hours, 2 hours, what? Now, if you remember, I said earlier that a virtual assistant usually has half a dozen clients that he or she is working with, and almost always is a she. So you want to find a VA that is busy, that has clients. You don't feel that, you're going to get pushed aside and dealt with as, a second-class client because she's got a lot of clients and you're just one of many. Actually, it's a better situation for you. I prefer to work with VAs who already have 5 or 6 clients rather than one who has just one. The VA who has no clients and you are their only client, they look at you as their meal ticket. So they want to get as many hours out of you as they can possible. The VA who has 6 clients doesn't want to get the maximum hours out of you. She probably wants to get more clients. So the difference is this: With the VA with 6 clients, what you can do with somebody like that is you can agree a just-in-time model. And this is how it works. And this is how I work with my VAs. Is I say to you, hey, look, I'm not going to hire you for a set amount of hours a week. I'm not going to hire you for 15 hours a week because some weeks I may have 20 hours. Some weeks I may have 3. It changes, your workload changes. So rather than do that, what I'll do is this. I will work with you on a just-in-time model, which is I will have tasks every week, and those tasks may range from 3 or 20 hours a week, but let's say on average, 10 hours a week. And what I want you to do is when I have those tasks, I want you to work on those tasks. And when I don't have tasks, I don't want you to work on anything. So what happens is you bill me for what you work every week based on what I put in your inbox, rather than this set 15 hours a week. And for those busy VAs, that situation works really well. As long as it doesn't sort of fluctuate between 0 and 40 hours a week. If you have 0 one week and 40 hours one week, your VA is going to find that a little bit difficult. But if it varies from, let's say, 5 to 15 hours a week, that's great for your VA. They'll be able to work with that. If they've got a lot of clients, it's fantastic. If you don't have much work, they'll simply go to the other client and work with them. If you have a lot of work, they'll simply scale back on the other clients. Very, very simple. If you have a VA with just one client who's you, or just maybe a couple of clients, and you say to them, I don't have any work this week, or I've only got 2 or 3 hours of work this week, that's going to be trouble for your VA because they need you to pay their bills, support their family, everything. They don't have any other source of income. So those tips I'd give to you in recruiting your VAs are quite essential to establish up front. Is when you look for a VA, find a virtual assistant that has multiple clients because that will benefit you. And also set the expectations when you recruit them that you're going to work on a just-in-time model where you're going to have flexible working hours, and you don't want them to bill you a set amount of work every week. It's not the money so much, but it's the noise, because they'll come back to you and say, hey, look, you're billing me for 15 hours this week. I've only done 5. Give me 10 more hours of tasks. That'll make me happy. That's a really bad situation to be in. That is where you get negative leverage. That is where they are the boss of you. Effectively, your VA is telling you what to do. You don't want to be in that situation. So there you go. Those are mistakes that entrepreneurs make, 3 ones. But the biggest mistake is this. I want to share with you the biggest mistake that entrepreneurs make when outsourcing. And you've got to avoid this mistake because this will kill your business. Outsourcing your 20%. I've seen some really, really cringeworthy examples of outsourcing your 20%. What do I mean by that? So let's say, for example, if a VA was sitting here right now doing this webinar, that would be outsourcing my 20% because it's me that you want to see sitting in this chair talking to you, because you know what I'm going to deliver in a webinar. You know my style, you know me, you know a bit about me and my personal history. I know a bit about you. We have an established relationship. Some of you are Entrepreneur Upgrade course members. Some of you are mastermind members. We've got a relationship. However, if my VA was sitting here and you turn up to this webinar, you're like, what the fuck is going on, man? What is this? You're going to walk away, right? But that happens in business. I've seen that happen. That's an extreme example, putting a VA in the hot seat of a webinar. That's an extreme and crazy example. But I've seen very similar situations in business. For example, outsourcing your writing to a VA. If writing is a big part of what you do, don't outsource it. As I said before, rather than outsource the writing, get a VA to support your writing. They could help you with the research. They could help you with the publishing, etc. Help you with the images and the pictures. Outsource your relationships. Don't ever outsource your relationships. So the absolute worst thing you can do in a business is outsource your relationships, because your relationships are the value of your business. So for example, if we deal with each other on a regular basis in business, you buy something from me, I contact you and say, hey, Graham, thanks so much for buying from me. I want to get on the phone, just have a quick chat with you and find out a bit about what you thought about that. You think, oh, that's cool. Here's the business owner. He's talking to me directly. We've got a one-to-one relationship. That's all cool. And then suddenly one day, whilst, we were talking to each other, Suddenly my VA starts getting involved and say, hey, Graham, I'm Christine, the VA. I want to talk to you about this. And you're like, who the hell are you? Like a minute ago, I was talking to Graham. Is he too busy now? Is he too busy now to talk to me? What's going on? People don't like it. And if you outsource a relationship, your business will suffer. You can outsource a transactional relationship, which is where basically all that person is doing is buying stuff from you. But if you have anything beyond transaction, like you have an ongoing conversation or you have some kind of deeper, meaningful relationship with that person, you cannot and you should not outsource that to a virtual assistant. So can you use a virtual assistant with your relationship building? Yes, but you absolutely can't use it for the relationships itself. So let me tell you how you can use a virtual assistant in relationship building. So a virtual assistant can help in, for example, let's say arranging a meeting. So you can arrange a meeting between you and a customer or you and a business partner, and your virtual assistant can find a venue, book the times, arrange everything. But your virtual assistant is not part of that relationship. That's a relationship between you and your customer. What your virtual assistant is doing is taking away all the noise away from that relationship so you can focus purely on that relationship with the customer. The absolute worst thing to do is to take you out of that and put the virtual assistant into that relationship. And that is going back to the outsourcing your life bullshit that we talked about earlier. That's where your customers will leave you eventually. So do not ever outsource your 20%. So it's really important actually to avoid outsourcing your 20% is to know what your 20% is in the first place. So for me, I believe my 20% is presenting webinars, doing podcasts, and the relationships I have with my mentees, the startups that I invest in, and the people that I work with in my masterminds, courses, and so on. That's my 20%. If I can focus 100% of my time on a 20%, I will grow my business. I will never outsource that stuff, but I will use a virtual assistant to support it. So as I said, I'll use a virtual assistant to support booking a podcast. I'll use a virtual assistant to support with my social media. I will never, however, use a virtual assistant to communicate directly with a customer or a client. Unless, for example, it's booking a meeting, but it will never be part of the relationship. So it's really important you never outsource your 20%. And I've seen some really, really bad examples of that, where people contact me. I've been dealing with a brand or a company, and suddenly now this random person comes into the conversation I don't know and has taken over the relationship. I'm like, goodbye. If you're too busy to value my feedback or value my conversation, I'm too busy for you. You cannot treat customers like that. So in finishing up today, I want to give you 4 power tips for outsourcing. And these are in the book as well as based on my own experience. And this is just really one slide that I want to share with you today. And if you have any questions, throw them in the chat box because we're coming to the end of this webinar. And, there's no questions. I'll finish the webinar early and just save it up and put it onto the Entrepreneur Upgrade course as a archive video. But if you have questions, now's the time to ask them. You can throw them into the live chat box and I'll do my best to answer them. So just whilst we're getting there, before we hit the questions, here are the 4 power tips in finishing up. This is how you can maximize outsourcing and outsourcing well. 80-20. Outsource the 80%. Outsource the 80% of the activities that's the low value task. So my tip to you is that after this webinar, write down a list of all your tasks and identify, let's say if you have 10 tasks, 2 of those tasks are your high value, 8 of those tasks are your low value. If you have 20 tasks, 4 are high value, 16 are low value. It's all the same ratio. However many tasks you have, identify the 20%, circle them, protect them. And this 80%, the other tasks, ask yourself, how can I outsource these? How can I delete them if I don't need to be doing it? But if I need to be doing them, how can I outsource them? So you can outsource anything from booking meetings to accountancy to social media, research. You can outsource anything. But if it's your 20% yourself, if it's your high value stuff, you can't outsource it. VPN. I haven't talked about VPNs There's a lot more about VPMs in the book. I talk a little bit about VPMs in the Entrepreneur Upgrade course. A VPM is a virtual project manager. I've had this in the past where I've had a group of virtual assistants. So I've had maybe, at one time I had, when I was not doing the India business, when I had 20 people outsourced in India. After that, when I had outsourced assistants in the Philippines, I had about 3 or 4 outsourced assistants at one time. And, I had one assistant doing graphic design, one assistant doing research, one assistant doing lead generation, and one assistant doing sort of general virtual assistant work. And what I did was I took the virtual assistant who was doing general virtual assistant work, because she was really good. And what I did was I made her a virtual project manager, VPM, virtual project manager. And what she did was she coordinated the other 3 VAs. So yes, you can have an outsourced team of virtual assistants, and you can have an outsourced team leader, a virtual project manager. And the best person for that is somebody who's already a virtual assistant. Ideally, somebody who is already your virtual assistant and is busy, has a lot of experience, charges good money, like the one we saw earlier, charging $15 an hour, with a lot of experience, maybe thousands of hours of experience. Not going to be working for you full time, but will be super efficient at coordinating other outsourced virtual assistants for you. So in theory, let's say, for example, you're developing applications. You could have app developers and have a virtual assistant coordinating all your people, whether it be your designers, your developers, your researchers, and put a virtual project manager in the middle of that. And the virtual project manager then reports to you. So you're not dealing with 4 outsourced virtual assistants at any one time. Third power tip is heavy lifting. So this is where I said, don't outsource your 20%. Never, never outsource your 20%. Forget that outsource your life bullshit, because that's really distracting. You need to be doing something, and you need to be doing your 20%. But what a virtual assistant can do for you is, rather than do your 20%, they can be doing the heavy lifting for you. So like I said, if you're doing writing, you're doing a lot of high quality writing content, you're putting content out there as a blog post, you're never going to get a virtual assistant to do your writing, but a virtual assistant can be really valuable for you to do the heavy lifting for you in that writing process. And actually, you could have a situation where you have a professional writer, a virtual assistant, and you. And what you don't want to do is pay your professional writer to create a blog post, because you're paying a professional writer good money when they're setting up a WordPress post, finding images, doing research, and so on. What you can use a virtual assistant for is to take the heavy lifting away from your professional writer. So what you're doing is, the money that you pay your professional writer, you're getting maximum bang for your buck. So you don't want to pay a professional writer to do low value tasks. You don't want to pay a professional writer to put links in the post, or get images for the post, or find keywords for the post, or whatever. Your virtual assistant can do that, and then hand that information to your professional writer, and your professional writer can then just focus on writing, which is what they are good at, rather than all the other stuff that goes with blog posting. So that's how you can use the heavy lifting model. As I said, I use that in podcasting, where I use my virtual assistant to book the guests. I also outsource the audio production as well. In future, as my podcasts grow, I would probably, bring in another virtual assistant for the marketing of the podcast and all the other kind of the posting of the podcasts. So then I'd have 3 people. I'd have an outsourced production of the podcast. I'd have, the production management, so somebody who's actually booking the guests and arranging all the scheduling and so on, and then I have somebody who's actually creating the blog posts. In that, I can create a virtual project manager who manages that whole service. So then I can focus purely on the 20%. My ideal situation is where I will just turn up to the podcast at a set time with my guest, record the podcast, and go do the next one. I'm not thinking about, right, I've got to send this to my audio engineer. I've got to create a blog post. I've got somebody just dealing with all of that. I put the file in a Dropbox file. My virtual project manager picks that up, knows that she has to then send that to the audio engineer. Audio engineer sends it back to the virtual project manager. Virtual project manager then gives it to the blog poster. The blog poster then creates a blog post out of all of this stuff. The virtual project manager then comes back to me and say, everything's done. It's ready to go. That's how you can outsource everything that's not your 20% in that situation. And my last advice as well is the just-in-time model. So important that you do not create a situation where you are effectively being bossed around by your virtual assistant. I'm not saying your virtual assistant wants to boss you around, but if you have a situation where they have set time, like 15 hours a week to work for you, and they are not getting 15 hours a week of work every week, which they won't be doing. They're going to get more or less every week. It's going to change. They come back to you and say, what do I do now? If you've got a virtual assistant coming back to you and saying, what do I do now? You have a bad situation. Rather than that, employ a just-in-time model, which is where you basically said to your virtual assistant, hey, look, I'm not going to give you set hours every week. It's going to be roughly 10 hours a week. Could be 5, could be 15. I'm going to put tasks in your task bin, and I'm going to use that on Slack or in Dropbox, whatever software works best. And I want you to work on those tasks. Bill me only for the time that you work. And some weeks you might get nothing. And that's absolutely fine, because you may be traveling, you may be busy with other stuff, you may have nothing to give them. Don't have them come back to you and ask for work. Best situation, as I said, that starts with who you employ as a virtual assistant. Find a virtual assistant who is busy, multiple clients, on the go at any one time. Do not take that as a sign of somebody who's going to ignore you, but take that as a sign of somebody who can slot best into the way that you should be outsourcing with them. So those are my 4 power tips in finishing up. Hopefully that was useful for you today. I've shared with you everything I know about outsourcing in 40 minutes based on that book. Let me share the book here. If you're interested in this book, I might be in the way of this book. So let me just turn my face off so you can see it. There you go. Virtual Freedom. There you go. That's what I want. Virtual Freedom. This is the book by Chris Ducker. I recommend this book. Really good book if you're interested in outsourcing. Really just gives you, a very plain and simple formula to follow. Think about how to use outsourcing workers such as virtual assistant. Also think about what kind of tasks you should be outsourcing to your VA. So that's what I shared with you today. Tips and tricks from this book, Virtual Freedom by Chris Ducker. And also my own experience as well, working with VAs for, 10 years plus, well before people started talking about the word virtual assistants. I was doing this stuff out in India. So there you go. Hopefully that was useful today. Did you like it? Let me know in the chat box. If you have any questions, I'll do my best to answer those in the chat box. If you're thinking about outsourcing, having any issues with outsourcing, you don't know where to start with outsourcing, let me know. You can let me know in the chat box, or you can let me know through the usual channels, which is what I'm going to do with this video is I will post the video on the Entrepreneur Upgrade platform, so you can get a copy of it there and you can review it if you want. If you're an Entrepreneur Upgrade member, it's going to go on there, so you can access it, go through, get the key lessons from this video, as well as supporting documents. What I do is with every webinar that I put up on the Entrepreneur Upgrade course, I usually add some supporting documents, worksheets, and so on, to help you get the most out of each lesson. And if you're in the mastermind as well, then, if you're in the Up.school mastermind, feel free to ask me any questions that you have about outsourcing through the usual channels, through our Slack channel. So guys, hopefully, that was useful for you. And I think the best place to start is to, get yourself a copy of this book, Virtual Freedom by Chris Ducker. And then, just try it out small. Go to a platform like Upwork and, just try and experiment. Say to your virtual assistant that, you're going to trial them for 5 hours just to see how it works. Because, 5 hours for you invested in an experiment with a virtual assistant is a good investment of time to see if that person's any good. And then, once they have proved themselves in a 5-hour trial, the next thing to do is then to say to them, hey, look, I want to employ you on a regular basis. Talk about the just-in-time model that you're going to use with them, and then take it from there. And then, grow your business with that virtual assistant. And as you hire more and more virtual assistants, take on board a virtual project manager who can then work with your virtual assistants. And that is how you can build a business without employing anybody. That's how you can build an ultra lean business where you have no employees and you have a team of outsourced people. That is where you can focus on that 20% that produces 80% of your value. Take that 80% off your table. And as Chris Ducker says, I suppose that is the way that you can buy more time, become more productive, and build your dream business. Building your dream business is really about doing the stuff that you really love doing. And how do you do that? Well, I guess the answer to doing that is really to take away the crap that you don't love doing. How to be happy in business is simply to do more of what makes you happy. And for me, that would be, as I said, like record the podcast, go. Record the podcast, go. I don't do any of the other stuff that goes with the podcast, whether it's producing the post, doing the audio, finding the guests. That's all taken care of. That will be, for me, the ultimate goal in building an outsourced team for my business. So hopefully you can do that too. If you like the webinar today, if you like this format, so Entrepreneur Upgrade members, Mastermind members, if you like this format, then like the video so I know that it's up your street. It's the kind of thing you're looking at. What I'm going to do next week as well is I'm going to do another live webinar exclusive for my Entrepreneur Upgrade and my Mastermind members. So hopefully, you'll join me there and I can share with you more insights and information on growing your business. What I do now is, if we've got a bit of time, maybe we can take some of the questions and have a look. All right, so first question, got a bit of time at the end. Let's take this one from Vipul. Is Upwork the best option for VPMs? Do you recommend any other sites and platforms? You've got really two options, two main established options for VPMs. And you're talking about VPMs, virtual project managers, rather than virtual assistants. So I'm assuming you're looking for experienced assistants, right? So the two options really are this. The first option is Upwork, which is the best option, which answers your question really, because it has the volume that you need. There are thousands of people, and virtual assistants go to Upwork. The best ones earn the most money on Upwork. So if you want a VPM, especially a VPM, virtual project manager, go to Upwork. Be prepared to pay $15 up for somebody who's really good. But don't worry about that. You don't need to be hiring these people 40 hours a week. A virtual project manager, you only need to be hiring this person 5 or 10 hours a week if they're really good at what they do. They don't want to be working with you 40 hours a week either, and vice versa. Upwork is probably the best place. There are other options. There are agencies who are specifically virtual assistant agencies. There are agencies. There's websites like TaskRabbit where you can go, and there are a lot of these kind of agencies which are effectively a website where they will just go and do tasks for you like a virtual assistant. I don't like those models. I've worked with those before. The reason I don't like those is what tends to happen, and you get this a little bit on Upwork as well, so watch out for this, is that when you go to an agency, is you pay the agency for the time. So already we're working with that, fit time model rather than the just-in-time model, which doesn't really work well. So you go to the agency and say, I have 10 hours a week. The agency will then start billing you 10 hours a week. You will have to pay 10 hours a week. You will have to fill up 10 hours a week. All the bad things that go with it we just discussed happened, right? But the other bad thing about working with agencies that I've found, and this is not necessarily true of all agencies, but it has to be my experience with agencies, is that you hire the agency rather than the assistant. So you hire the agency and the assistant's turnover is really high. So one week you're working with Christine, and the next week it's Jocelyn, and the next week it's Christine again, and then it's Bob and whatever. And that's really bad because the first few hours of working with that person, you have to retrain that person. So you're wasting time. And then, if you've got a high turnover, you can't entrust your assistants with the kind of work that you really want to be doing, like you giving them passwords. I've had virtual assistants with my credit card as well. That's a whole different matter. But that's where somebody I've worked with a long time, I can't give that to an agency, right? I don't know what the hell will happen to that credit card. But if I know it's one person, that's great. So my advice would be, go to Upwork, find a virtual assistant with a lot of experience, thousands of hours of experience, trial them out for 5 hours. And then, if you specifically want a virtual project manager, if they're really good as a virtual assistant, what I'll do is I'll interview them and I'll ask them to tell me what they could do. So say, look, this is my situation. I have, a developer working on the e-commerce side. I have, customer inquiries. I have a website designer, whatever it be, your sort of outsourced team, and me, of course. And I want to put you into this situation as a virtual project manager so you can take away a lot of my time that I'm committing to all of these tasks. But I want you to tell me what you think you can do. And then you give it to that VA, and the VA will tell you, okay, right, this is what I can do, because they've got a lot of experience. They should know how to operate in this environment. And they could also operate in an environment which isn't necessarily completely fixed. They have to start thinking a little bit of initiative here. I would ask the VA to tell me, list out to me all the things that you could do for me that could effectively take away 10 hours of my time a week so I can focus more on my high value tasks. I have done that before. I have had that fail on me because I had a virtual assistant that wasn't good enough, that just wanted to be told what to do. They weren't good enough to become a virtual project manager. But I've had a virtual assistant who was a fantastic virtual project manager. When I said, hey, look, this is my situation. I have, like I described before, 4 outsourced workers. I had a virtual assistant, designer, and so on. And I asked one of the VAs that I was working with at the time, I said, you tell me what you can do in this situation. I explained to them everything that was going on. And they came back and I said, I'm going to do this, 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 and this. And maybe this as well. That's completely up to you. And what do you think about this? And they were really proactive. I was surprised by how proactive they are. Now, that kind of VA is worth paying a lot of money for. I think I paid $15 or $20, which is quite high for a virtual assistant for that VA, but they only work for me 5 hours a week. So, I was paying $100 for that virtual assistant as a virtual project manager. Whereas if I recruited somebody who was a lower skill, maybe $10, I'd probably be employing them for 15 hours a week. They were getting a lot less done and a lot less quality and more hours. So, a very long answer to your question, but in short, you go to Upwork, find somebody with a lot of experience, tell them the situation, ask them as a VA to become a virtual project manager, what could they do for me? You may find somebody who already has experience as a virtual project manager. If that's the case, that's even better. But still ask them, what could they do for me? That would be my key recruitment question, because a virtual project manager has to have some kind of initiative, some kind of, not necessarily an entrepreneurial mind, but a managerial mind that they can take care of other people, which isn't necessarily a virtual assistant skill. Hopefully that answers your question. If it does, let me know. Akos, thanks for the webinar. Not at the phase of getting VAs, but a lot of great info there. Yeah, pleased to share it. I think you have to think about what is the shape of the business that you're going to grow. And what you can do now, Akos, is rather than think about virtual assistants, what I would do is still go back to the 80-20 task. Look at what you do, list those 10 tasks that you do on a daily basis and split them out. What are the 2 tasks which are high value, and what are the 8 tasks that are low value in what you do? And even if you're not going to outsource those now, then think about how you can do more of the 2 and less of the 8. Think about those 2 and think about, I want to focus more of my time on those 2 and automate or delete those 8. And maybe at first you can't do them all, but maybe you can delete 1 or automate 2. Start with that, because what that then does, and I know this is a challenge that you face, is having time to build your business when you're busy dealing with clients, is there are some things that you're doing, maybe you can kind of chip away and eliminate those, because that may save you 5 hours a week. And by saving 5 hours a week, you can invest that in your business. Even if it's only 5 hours a week, you can make progress, minimum viable progress on a weekly basis, and keep the thing moving forward with momentum. Thank you very much, guys. We have reached the top of the hour, 10 o'clock here in Japan. Thank you so much for coming along tonight and sharing your comments and feedback and telling me that I didn't have any sound for the first 5 minutes, but hopefully that was cool with you. And you know what, next week, I'm just going to grab my book for next week, guys. If you're on the Entrepreneur Upgrade course, or if you are a mastermind member, this is the one to look out for next week. Just make sure I can get this on the screen. This is what I'm doing this week. It comes out invisible, strangely, because of the green screen. There you go. That's weird, isn't it? This is what I'm doing. This is all about essentialism. What I want to do next week is share with you ideas on how you can get more done in less time. Really good book, Essentialism. This is really a continuation of the 80-20 theme. So if you're interested in an 80-20, if you're interested in doing more with less time, being less busy, sleeping more, if you're interested in all that, being less stressed, being more productive, more creative, if you're interested in all of that, join me next week for another webinar. And we're doing it a different fashion this time. It's going to be exclusive, intimate, just you and me. I much more enjoyed this format than the public format. So hopefully you did as well. Hit me up with a like. I'll see you next week, guys. Have a fantastic week. Keep rocking. Let's make 2017 the best year yet.